The word your Bible translates as rib appears 41 times in the Old Testament. In 40 of those, every major translation on earth agrees it means side. Side of the tabernacle, side of the ark, side of the temple. Then it shows up once in Genesis 2 verse 21, and suddenly it is a rib, one time, out of 41. That is not a translation. That is an exception nobody questioned. But that is not the strangest part. The ancient Greek translators refused to call the state Adam enters sleep. They called it ecstasy. And the text never once says he opened his eyes. That is Genesis 2 verse 21. The Hebrew word is tardemah. It appears 7 times in the entire Old Testament. 5 of those, God is the direct cause. But before we get to what the Greek translators saw in that word, we need to start where the English went wrong. Because the verb Genesis uses for what God did with that side is not the word for shaping or making, it is the word for constructing a temple. We are going to walk Genesis 2 verse by verse through the Hebrew, tsela, tardemah, shava, and we are going to trace exactly where each English word went wrong and what the original text was pointing to. By the end, a 3-minute practice built from a single phrase in Genesis 2 verse 23 that mirrors what this passage maps to about recognizing what was already part of you. The Hebrew word is tsela, Strong's H6763. Open Exodus and start counting. Exodus 25 verse 12. The rings shall be on the 2 sides of the ark. That word sides is tsela. Exodus 26 verse 20. For the second side of the tabernacle. Tsela again. Exodus 27 verse 7. The 2 sides of the altar. Tsela. Exodus 30 verse 4. On the 2 sides of it. Tsela. Every single time side. Move to 1 Kings 6 verse 5. Tsela appears for the side chambers of Solomon's temple. Ezekiel 41. The prophet sees the future temple. Tsela appears roughly 10 times for the side rooms. Always side, never rib. 2 Samuel 16 verse 13. Shimei cursed David from the side of the hill. Tsela, 40 times across Exodus, Kings, Ezekiel, Samuel, and Job. Always the side of a structure or a surface. Then Genesis 2 verse 21. He took one of his tsela, and here for the first and only time, your English Bible says rib. You have felt this before. That slow turn when something you repeated your entire life was never wrong because someone lied, but because nobody looked. Nobody opened Exodus 26 and compared it to Genesis 2. That is what one Hebrew word does to this story. But the count is only the beginning. It changes the noun. It does not tell you who changed it or when. That trail runs through 3 languages across 2,000 years, and it starts in a library in Alexandria. Around 250 years before the Common Era, Jewish scholars in Alexandria translated the Hebrew scriptures into Greek. That translation is called the Septuagint. When they reached Genesis 2 verse 21 and found tsela, they chose the Greek word pleura. In classical Greek, the primary meaning of pleura is the side of the body, not a rib, not a bone, the side. Homer used it for the flank. Herodotus used it for a lateral surface. The word could include ribs the way your side includes ribs, but pleura itself points to the whole lateral surface, not a single bone. Now, most people would stop there and call it ambiguous, but the receipt that seals it is sitting in your own New Testament, and it is not ambiguous at all. John 19 verse 34. A Roman soldier pierces the pleura of Christ on the cross. Every Bible in existence translates that as his side, not his rib. Same Greek word, 2 passages. One they call side, one they call rib. The inconsistency is on the page. The decisive moment came around 400 CE. A scholar named Jerome translated the Bible into Latin for the Western Church. His version is called the Vulgate. For tsela in Genesis 2, Jerome chose the Latin word costa. Costa is not ambiguous, it means rib, a specific curved bone. That single word choice became the foundation for every English Bible that followed. You know this feeling. That slow recognition when you trace an idea backward and find the exact moment it quietly shifted, not in some conspiracy, not by some council decree, in one translator's word choice that nobody questioned for 1,600 years. Every English Bible followed Jerome. Wycliffe in 1382 wrote ribis, Tyndale in 1530 wrote ribis, Coverdale in 1535, the Geneva Bible in 1560, the Bishop's Bible in 1568. The King James Version in 1611 wrote ribs. Not one of them went back to the Hebrew. They all translated from Jerome's Latin. And for 16 centuries, the English-speaking world read rib where the Hebrew said side. The Talmud had already questioned it. Barakot 61a. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani argued directly that tsela in Genesis 2 means side. His proof text was Exodus 26 verse 20, the same verse we opened with. The side of the tabernacle. He made this argument nearly 2,000 years ago. The rabbis caught the error. The Western Church followed Jerome instead. Modern translations have started correcting it. The Jewish Publication Society Tanakh, published in 1985, reads one of his sides. The Net Bible reads a part of his side. The correction is underway, but most of the English-speaking world still hears rib every Sunday. In this reading, the side of the tabernacle corresponds to the side of the human. The same Hebrew word building the same correspondence between sacred architecture and the body. This is correspondence, not medical claim. Map, not prescription. We are decoding a text, not prescribing a treatment. Now you know the word means side. But knowing the noun changes nothing until you see the verb. Because what Genesis says God did with that side is not what any surgeon does with a bone. The Hebrew uses a word reserved for builders. Most people carry the same picture. God opens Adam, removes a bone, fashions a woman, closes the wound. That is the inherited image. But the Hebrew verbs tell a completely different story. Genesis 2 verse 7. God formed Adam from the dust of the ground. The verb is yatsar, Strong's H3335. The potter's word, hands in wet clay, pressing, squeezing, molding. Now read Genesis 2 verse 22. God took the tsela and, here the verb changes, and nobody talks about the change. The text does not say God yatsar the woman. He did not form her the way he formed Adam. The text does not say God asa the woman, the general Hebrew word for making. The text says God banah the woman, banah. Strong's H129. God built the woman. Banah appears 376 times in the Old Testament. It means to construct a house, to raise a city wall, to erect a temple, to lay a foundation. It is the architect's verb, not the potter's verb. And it is never used for any other act of creation in Genesis. Not for the earth, not for the heavens, not for the animals, not for Adam. Eve alone is built. The difference between yatsar and banah is the difference between shaping raw material and constructing something with intention. A potter shapes, an architect builds. The text gave Adam the potter. The text gave Eve the architect. You have felt this difference. The difference between something accidental and something deliberately made. Tethered to banah, the text reads like the description of an architectural act, not a surgical one, and the connection runs deeper. The Hebrew word for son is ben, Strong's H1121. It derives from banah. A son is literally a builder of the family name. Genesis 16 verse 2, Sarah says of Hagar, "Perhaps I may be built up through her." The Hebrew is ibana, the passive form of banah. The verb that builds the woman is the same verb that builds families. One more verb. Genesis 2 verse 21. God closed up the flesh in its place. The Hebrew is sagar, Strong's H5462. The same verb in Genesis 7 verse 16 when God shut Noah in the ark. A divine sealing, not a suture, a sacred enclosure. Side, not rib. Built, not formed. Sealed, not stitched. But there is one detail in Genesis 2 verse 21 that sits before both the noun and the verb. The state God puts Adam into before anything happens. And when you look up that Hebrew word, you find something the text never reverses. Everyone who heard this passage in church was given the same image. God put Adam to sleep, like anesthesia. God performed a procedure, and Adam woke up and met his wife. That is the picture, and the Hebrew demolishes it. The word is not ordinary sleep, it is tardemah, Strong's H8639. It appears exactly 7 times in the entire Old Testament. In 5 of those 7, God is named as the direct cause. This is not fatigue. This is not rest. This is a state imposed from outside the person by divine agency. Genesis 15 verse 12. The same word falls on Abraham during the covenant of the pieces, and the text adds something chilling. A horror of great darkness came upon him. That is tardemah, the same tardemah as Genesis 2 verse 21. And the ancient Greek translators of the Septuagint made a remarkable choice. They did not translate tardemah as sleep. They translated it as ekstasis, ecstasy, a standing outside of oneself. The oldest Greek translators understood that tardemah was not unconsciousness. It was a visionary state, a trance. 1 Samuel 26 verse 12. It calls the sleep tardemah, Yahweh, a deep sleep from the Lord, the divine name attached to the word. It pins down Saul's entire army so David can walk through their camp untouched. Isaiah 29 verse 10. God pours out a spirit of tardemah as deliberate blinding, an inability to perceive. In modern Hebrew, the root gives us tardemah, meaning coma, and hardamah, meaning sedation. Even the living language remembers this word is not about rest. Now the critical observation, the detail hiding in plain sight. Genesis 2 verse 21 says tardemah fell on Adam and he slept. The Hebrew verb for slept is wayishan, but after this verse the text never says Adam woke up. Read that again. The text never says he woke up. God puts Adam into a divine trance. The text records that he slept. Then Genesis 2 verse 22 simply transitions. God built the woman. God brought her to the man. Adam speaks, but the verb for waking is absent. Compare Genesis 28 verse 16. Jacob explicitly awoke from his sleep. The Hebrew uses wayikatz. That waking verb exists. The writers of Genesis knew how to use it. They used it for Jacob after his dream at Bethel. They used it when Pharaoh woke from his dream in Genesis 41. The verb was available. The convention was established. They did not use it for Adam. The absence is not accidental. It is textually conspicuous. The pattern of recording that someone woke from sleep or from tardemah exists throughout the Hebrew Bible. The writer of Genesis 2 chose not to follow it. You have felt something like this. That disorienting recognition when you realize you have been moving through something half aware. Not asleep exactly, but not fully present either. You were doing things, speaking, making decisions, but some part of you was not all the way there. And the moment you notice is the moment something begins to shift. The absent waking verb in Genesis 2 reads like the text is naming that state, not a sleep you recover from, a trance you recognize you are in. In this reading, tardemah corresponds to a condition of awareness where outer perception has been suspended. Not death, not ordinary sleep. A trance, the text never records ending. This is correspondence, not medical claim. Map, not prescription. We are decoding a text, not prescribing a treatment. The side is taken. The woman is built. The trance never ends. But the passage is not finished. Adam speaks next, and the name he gives her carries two meanings in the same word. And the place where all of this happens has a meaning your English Bible treated as a proper noun. Genesis 2 verse 23. Adam speaks for the first time in the entire narrative. This is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called Isha, because she was taken from Ish, woman from man. The Hebrew words mirror each other. Adam looks at what was built from his side and does not see a stranger. He sees himself. This is the convergence point. The side from the translation chain, the architectural verb, the unending trance. They all arrive here. Everything the Hebrew has been building lands in this one moment of recognition. And the names in this passage are not decorations, they are receipts. Adam was never a name the way English speakers use names. The Hebrew Adam, Strong's H120, shares its root with Adamah, H127, ground, soil, earth. Genesis 2 verse 7 makes the connection explicit. God formed the Adam from the Adamah, the human from the humus. The wordplay is untranslatable. English gives you Adam and ground. Hebrew gives you a single root running through both. Inside that root sits Adam. H119, to be red. The Adam is the red one, and inside Adam itself sits Dam. H118, blood, the red earth being whose very name contains blood, and then Eve, except her Hebrew name is not Eve, it is Chava. Strong's H2332, from the root Chava, H2331. Chava means to live. That is the meaning your English gives you. Eve, mother of all living. But Chava also means to declare, to reveal, to show. The Septuagint translators recognize this dual meaning. They rendered Chava as Zoe in Greek, life. But the Hebrew carries both senses in a single root. Strong's itself defines it as properly to live, by implication intensively to declare or show. The name is not just life, it is life and revelation, both meanings alive in the same word at the same moment. Genesis 3 verse 20. Adam named his wife Chava because she was the mother of all living. Look at when this naming happens, immediately after Genesis 3 verse 19. Dust you are, and to dust you shall return. God has just pronounced death, and in the face of that pronouncement, Adam names the one built from his side life, and revealer, You have felt this, that experience of naming something alive inside you at the exact moment everything around you says it is over. The dual meaning in Chava reads like a correspondence for recognizing vitality in the presence of endings. One more word, Eden. Your English Bible treats it as a place name, but Eden, Strong's H731, is the same word as Eden, H5730. A common Hebrew noun meaning pleasure, delight, luxury. The Vulgate confirms this. Jerome translated Gan Eden as paradisum voluptatis, paradise of pleasure. Even the man who gave us rib instead of side knew that Eden meant delight. Genesis 2 verse 8, God planted a garden in delight. That is what the Hebrew says when you stop treating Eden as a location. The entire scene, the trance, the side, the building, the naming, all of it takes place inside a state the text calls pleasure. 5 words, tsela, banah, tardemah, Eden, side, built, trance, life and revelation, delight. Every one mistranslated or reduced to a label in your English Bible. Together, they form one sentence. Inside delight, a unified being enters a trance. Its side is architecturally built into life and revelation, and the trance never records an ending. The question is not whether you believe this reading. The question is what you do when you sit with what the text actually says. This practice is built from the phrase in Genesis 2 verse 23, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. It takes 3 minutes, no prayer formula, no petition, no goal, just recognition. First, sit in stillness for 60 seconds. Eyes closed, no words, no asking for anything, just presence. Let the outer input quiet. This corresponds to the tardemah, the state where external perception stops. Second, bring to mind one quality you have rejected in yourself, something you pushed away, something you labeled as not part of you. Do not fix it. Do not name it good or bad, just hold it. This corresponds to the tsela, the side that was separated. Third, say inwardly the phrase from the passage, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, let it sit. Do not force anything. Just notice whether the rejected quality softens when you claim it with the words of the text. This mirrors Genesis 2 verse 23. Adam recognized that what stands before him was always part of him. 3 minutes, nothing to fix, nothing to build, just the recognition that what was separated was always yours. And if you want a second practice, before sleep tonight, spend 2 minutes noticing one sensation of genuine ease in the body, warmth, softness, stillness, whatever is already present without you producing it. Do not search for it, just notice what is already there. Name it inwardly as the garden. Let awareness rest in that sensation without trying to change it or hold on to it. This corresponds to Eden, not a location. A state of delight, the text says, was always the setting. Not something you earn, something you stop leaving. The passage began with a word that was mistranslated for 2,000 years. It ends with a state that was never supposed to be a place on a map. And between those 2 points, one sentence from Genesis 2 verse 23 carries the whole reading. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. What was separated was always yours. The text says so, in every language it has ever been written in.